courtroom was silent, but the tension was suffocating. All eyes were fixed on Michael Carter, a decorated police officer with over 15 years of service, now standing in handcuffs. His jaw was tight, his eyes cast downward, not from guilt, but from the weight of disbelief. The judge's gavel cracked through the silence like thunder. "Guilty!" Gasps echoed across the courtroom. Michael's shoulders slumped as the verdict tore his world apart. He had dedicated his life to justice, yet now justice had turned its back on him. His claims of innocence had fallen on deaf ears. Evidence had been found in his locker, but Michael knew deep down it had been planted. But even heavier than the sentence was the pain of separation, not from his badge or his freedom, but from Luke, his loyal K9 partner. The German Shepherd sat at the back, alert and loyal, not understanding that this might be their final goodbye. Michael looked up, his voice cracking as he spoke. "Your Honor, before I'm taken away, please, just one last moment with Luke." The room stirred with murmurs. The judge, silent for a long breath, finally nodded. 3 minutes, he said firmly. As soon as Luke was released, he bolted down the aisle, claws tapping against the cold floor. Michael dropped to his knees, arms wide open. Luke lunged into his embrace, tail wagging, nose pressed into Michael's chest. "I'm so sorry, buddy," Michael whispered, choking back tears. "I let you down. I won't be there anymore." Luke whimpered, nuzzling closer, but then something changed. His body stiffened. He began sniffing urgently at Michael's jacket. Then he barked. Once, loud and sharp. Michael flinched, startled. Luke's nose pressed deeper, pawing at a seam near the chest pocket. His bark grew louder, more insistent, drawing everyone's attention as tension crept back into the courtroom. Luke's sudden barking cut through the tense silence like a siren. The judge's brow furrowed. "What's the dog doing?" he asked, his voice sharp. Luke tugged harder at Michael's jacket, pawing at a hidden seam. An officer cautiously stepped forward, unsure whether to intervene. Michael remained still, trusting Luke's instincts. Then, with a faint metallic clink, something fell from his jacket and landed on the floor. A small black recording device. Gasps rippled through the room. The prosecutor's face drained of color. That doesn't prove anything," he snapped, stepping forward. But the judge raised a hand. "Hold your ground," he commanded. "Officer, pick it up." The officer retrieved the recorder and, at the judge's order, pressed play. Static crackled. Then a voice emerged. "Just plant the evidence. No one's going to question it. Carter's got a clean record. He's perfect to take the fall." A stunned silence followed. Michael's heart pounded. He recognized that voice. It was his former supervisor, Captain Ray Harding. The judge's expression turned cold. He slammed his gavel. "This trial is not over," he declared. "Secure that device. We're reopening this case." Hope flickered in Michael's chest for the first time in weeks, and it all started with Luke. Michael stood frozen, struggling to process what had just happened. The words from that recorder echoed in his mind like a siren in the night. The judge's firm voice brought him back. "Escort the defendant to holding and secure the evidence. This case is far from closed." As officers led him out of the courtroom, Michael glanced over his shoulder. Luke stood still, his intelligent eyes following every movement, as if understanding the weight of what had just occurred. For the first time since his arrest, Michael felt something unfamiliar. Hope. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, sensing a bombshell. Inside, the legal team scrambled, stunned by the dramatic turn of events. But Michael only had one thought. Justice might still be possible. Back in his cell, he sat quietly, Luke's bark still echoing in his ears. His partner hadn't just said goodbye. He had spoken up, and in doing so, he may have saved everything. After the courtroom chaos, Luke was temporarily placed in the K9 unit's care. Officer Sarah Mitchell, Michael's longtime friend and fellow cop, stepped forward. "I'll take him," she volunteered. Luke wasn't just another dog. He was family, and Sarah could see the restlessness in his eyes. Back at the station, Luke paced inside his kennel, occasionally barking at shadows. Sarah watched him carefully. "What are you trying to tell me, boy?" she whispered. Then something clicked. She grabbed his leash and led him down the corridor to Michael's old locker. The moment they arrived, Luke lunged at the lower compartment, pawing and sniffing furiously. Sarah's heart pounded. With trembling fingers, she unlocked the compartment and pulled open the door. Inside was a small, unmarked envelope hidden beneath some uniforms. She opened it slowly, her breath catching. Inside were grainy photographs showing Captain Harding meeting with a known criminal. Behind the photos was a folded document, a payment ledger and notes linking Harding to illegal dealings tied directly to Michael's case. Sarah stared at the evidence, her pulse racing. "Luke," she whispered, her voice cracking, "you just found the smoking gun." She picked up her phone. It was time to call the judge. Again. The judge stared at the photos and documents spread across his desk. Every image, every transaction note pointed to a rot far deeper than a single officer gone rogue. Captain Harding wasn't just corrupt. He was part of something much larger. "This is bigger than I thought," the judge muttered, rubbing his temples. "Much bigger." He called an emergency hearing within hours. Whispers raced through the precinct like wildfire. Officers who had once proudly worn their badges now eyed each other with suspicion. Harding, arrested and in custody, refused to speak, but the documents were loud enough. They tied him to bribery, false testimony, and deliberate case manipulation, including Michael's. Sarah presented the evidence calmly, Luke by her side like a sentinel of truth. The courtroom was silent as the judge turned to Michael. "You're officially cleared of all charges," he said, his voice steady. "But this isn't the end. We need your help." Michael looked at the files, then at Luke. He had a choice, walk away free or dive deeper into a broken system. He nodded slowly. "I'm in, but not for the department. For the truth." Luke sat at his feet, tail still, eyes locked forward, ready for the next mission. The task force formed quickly, and Michael dove into the investigation alongside Sarah. Files were reopened, testimonies re-examined, and timelines cross-checked. It didn't take long before patterns emerged. Dozens of cases with planted evidence, altered reports, and buried leads. Each thread led back to Captain Harding, but also hinted at someone above him. In the files, a recurring set of initials surfaced. AR payments, approvals, and directives all seemed to trace back to this unknown figure. Sarah furrowed her brow. "Whoever this AR is, they've been pulling strings from the shadows." Michael's gut twisted. This wasn't just corruption. This was organized. Then came the message. Late one night, as Michael combed through reports at the precinct, his phone buzzed. A blocked number. The text was brief. "You're digging too deep. Stop, or you'll regret it." He stared at the screen, heart racing. Sarah leaned over his shoulder, reading it aloud, her jaw clenched. "They're watching us." Michael looked at Luke, who sat calmly nearby, ears perked, eyes alert. They were getting close, and someone was getting nervous. He tucked the phone away and whispered, "Let them watch. We're not backing down." The deeper they went, the more dangerous the truth became. The precinct's old conference room had become their war room. Piles of files, maps, and red-marked photos covered every surface. It was past midnight, and only Michael, Sarah, and Luke remained. A single desk lamp cast long shadows as they studied a file marked "Confidential." Then the lights flickered. Luke's ears perked up. He let out a low, steady growl and rose to his feet. Michael's instincts kicked in. "Something's wrong," he said quietly. Sarah reached for her sidearm just as the room went dark. Glass shattered. Footsteps thudded outside. Michael motioned to the side. "Cover," he whispered. Sarah ducked behind the table, clutching the bag of files. The door creaked open, and then Luke sprang. A masked intruder barely stepped inside before Luke tackled him, jaws clamping onto his arm. The man screamed, dropping his weapon. Michael kicked it away, drawing his own gun on a second figure entering fast. "Don't move!" he shouted. Then, thud. Tear gas canisters rolled in, hissing. "We're out of time," Sarah yelled, coughing. She grabbed the documents and bolted for the emergency exit. Michael and Luke covered her, dodging gunfire as they escaped into the night. They didn't just have evidence now. They had enemies. By morning, the truth had exploded across national headlines. Sarah had delivered the files to a trusted investigative journalist just hours after the attack. The exposé aired before dawn, complete with audio recordings, payment records, and photographs tying Captain Harding to a sprawling criminal enterprise. But the biggest shock? AR wasn't just a shadowy puppet master. He was a powerful local politician, Arthur Reynolds, long praised for his clean image and community service. The very man who had once shaken Michael's hand during an award ceremony was now exposed as the architect of a web of corruption and manipulation. Arrests swept through the city like wildfire. Dirty cops, bought officials, and criminal middlemen, all taken into custody. Michael stood on the courthouse steps, finally a free man. Reporters swarmed him, but his eyes were only on Luke, who stood faithfully at his side, tail wagging and eyes calm. "You saved me, buddy," Michael whispered, kneeling beside him. Twice. He didn't care about cameras or praise. He cared about justice, for himself, and for everyone who'd been silenced. Luke leaned into his touch as if knowing their fight was over. Almost. Because in Michael's heart, one truth remained. There's always another battle for what's right. Weeks later, the world had moved on, but Michael hadn't forgotten. He sat on the porch of his modest home, the evening sun casting a golden glow across the yard. Luke chased a worn-out tennis ball with the same energy he had on the force, his tail wagging like nothing had ever gone wrong. Michael watched him with a quiet smile, a cup of coffee in hand and peace finally in his heart. Not because the battle had been easy, but because they had made it through, together. He knelt down as Luke trotted over, ball in his mouth, eyes shining. Michael took it, ruffled the fur behind his ears, and whispered, "We did it, boy. It's finally over." Luke leaned into him, resting his head against Michael's chest. He didn't need a medal, didn't need applause. He had the truth, and the loyalty of a partner who never gave up on him.